PDI committee for inviting me to give this presentation today, where I hope to outline the journey. I hate that word, but the journey I took to finally get my promotion to professor. So I suppose to begin with, just to outline my career, I'm one of the, I think I'm a rare breed now, because I've been in UCD. I've never been anywhere else. So I started in UCD in '82 as an undergraduate student, got my PhD there in 1991, and then got appointed assistant professor in 1995 after 3 or 4 years working as a postdoc. I went for my first promotion in 2004 to what was then senior lecturer, and that was successful. And then decided 10 years after that to apply to what was then associate professor, but what is now called professor. And that application was unsuccessful. So I have an unsuccessful journey as well as a more successful one more recently. So as I say, that application was rejected in 2004. And then in 2019, I'll just move those out of the way for myself, I finally got my promotion to professor. And it's probably just of some interest, maybe, the system that was there in 2014 was very different than the system that's currently applies. It was a quota system, it was competitive. And now, as you're probably all aware, and I'll allude to in a later slide, everybody's judged individually against the developmental framework. After my rejection in 2014, I decided that was it. I wasn't going to apply for promotion again. I couldn't work any harder. And for a year or two, I was in somewhat of a huff. I got over that. And as I say, I started the process again in 2018. So it was quite a long process. The way I approached it was in July of that year, I had a bit of time, and I started trying to complete first of all, update my RMS profile, which I'd neglected to some extent. And what complicated the issue at that time was UCD was introducing a new RMS system. So I happened to start the process just as we were changing from one to the other, which slightly complicated the issue. But anyway, so I started completing the application form in 2018, and it took, you know, it's quite a long process. So anytime I had an hour here or an hour there and I didn't want to do what I was supposed to be doing, I would enter another little bit into the form. I did contact my potential external assessors in around November. For this process, associate professor to professor, you need to nominate 3 external assessors. Again, depending on your discipline, that can be somewhat challenging because forestry, the area I work in, is quite small. And I had been involved with my colleagues in Europe through cost actions, which sometimes led to papers being published. So in some ways that eliminated quite a number of potential external assessors, because you couldn't have published with them, as far as I can recall. You know, there were certain constraints. Anyway, eventually I found 3 who indicated they would be willing to have their names put forward, and that, I think, was November 2018, sorry. By January 2019, I shared the proposal with my head of school. Again, trying to remember the details at this stage has become more difficult over 2 years now. But certainly he gave us official feedback within a month. Then it went on to the college principal. She gave her commentary. So by May of 2019, the application was finally submitted. You can see from the UCD website, you get updates on how the application is progressing. So it was clear I had a prima facie case, I think. Then it was clear that the external assessors had submitted their reports, and that happened fairly quickly. And then I began to get very impatient, because I'm naturally an impatient person, and there was nothing happening for a long time. And that, I think, was partly because I'd submitted in May and the promotions committee didn't meet at that time during the summer. So it took till November 2019 when I finally got an email, I think towards the end of the November, telling me that I had been successful. So that was quite pleasing, obviously. The development framework, in contrast, as I say, to the previous approach, to me is a much better system. It makes it very clear. It provides the rubrics, I suppose, for promotion. It makes it very clear the areas that the university consider to be important. And for a professor, it is I suppose the middle one there, the indicator of outstanding achievement that you're expected to hit. You don't have to hit it, obviously, for every item. You can maybe have exceptional in some areas, substantial in other areas. The idea being, as far as I can see, that they should balance out. What you're seeing there has yellow on it. It's not that I hit exceptional in all the areas that that you can see there, but I just used it as a method to indicate to myself that I had dealt with that particular item. There was, I think, 14 or 15, I can double check my application now in a moment. There were 14 and 15 such rows. And as I had completed the text on one of them, I marked it off the list to say that for myself, that I had it done. Even for people going through the P4G process, or people who may be thinking of applying in 3 or 4 years' time, this was very useful because, or this is very useful. It shows you where you may have gaps in what you're doing and where you may need to fill them in order to be successful, or at least apply, I suppose. It was also a much fairer method, I think, than the previous one, because all the 3 areas and the areas within appear to me to be treated equally. I don't know what algorithm or how the promotions committee decides, but given that there are 14 or 13 items, to me that suggested they were all treated equally under the 3 main headings of research, teaching and leadership. So what I learned from the unsuccessful application, and you know, this might be useful for you to learn, the feedback I got was actually quite limited. Basically, as I read it, work harder, increase the number of PhDs you supervise to completion, avail of opportunities of innovation and education, and avail of opportunities for leadership positions in the school and internationally. So as I say, when I saw that, I put it in a drawer and said I won't look at it again because it was annoying me. But luckily, through my involvement in cost actions and getting myself known internationally, I was invited to take part in a couple of EU consortia and became the work package leader in those. And that, I think, certainly was very important this time around. I could demonstrate my international standing, I suppose. I did increase my leadership roles, not through choice. The previous head of forestry retired and I took over all his responsibilities, including program director for forestry and head of Forest Research Centre. I increased the number of modules. It wasn't something I was asked to do. We had retirements in my section. We deliver a professional program. We have a small number of students. Modules have to be delivered. If you can't take on more staff, the staff that are there have to deliver more. So I was able to show in my application, I could compare the number of modules I was delivering with the average for the school, and I could demonstrate that I was delivering more than average. So the workload model that we have in our school, and I presume is done in other schools, you can use that as a benchmark for your performance or your work against the average for your school and the average at the grade you wish to be promoted to within your school. And I also increased the number of PhDs. partly because of those consortia. So this is more or less my last slide, just some key points. It may seem very simplistic, but from when I made the decision, even the first time around for my first promotion, I literally had a box in my office or a folder, because I don't necessarily have a good memory. So I thought this would be a useful thing if I did something that potentially could be useful in promotion. I'd literally put a record of it in the box. It may be a thank you letter for agreeing to act on an advisory board or interview board or whatever it may be. I found it a useful way to kind of store things. Certainly it was very useful when there wasn't the way the RMS profile is set up now, which seems to, you know, record for you the number of committees you sit on, etc. within the university. So maybe it's less important, but as I say, you will forget key items. I mean, I was thinking about this presentation the other night, and thinking about also an email that I hadn't answered, where somebody was asking about being hosted as a Fulbright scholar, and I suddenly realized that maybe 10 or so years ago, maybe less than that, I had hosted. I had gone through the whole process with a colleague from the US, applying for a Fulbright scholarship for him. He was successful, and I remember the other night I never mentioned it in any of my applications. So, you know, you will forget. The other thing I learned with the combination of the developmental framework is things that, from a personal perspective, may seem unenticing, actually are considered important in the developmental framework. And I give the example of, like in the last 5 or 6 years, I've been asked to host 2 international researchers from, you know, relatively high up in their research institutes. And my initial reaction was, I don't want this hassle. You know, it's going to be extra work, no matter what they say about working independently and helping you with your project. They're going to just cause me extra work. So I kind of reluctantly took them on. And then when I looked at the developmental framework as part of this process, their invitations to host visiting doctoral and postdoctoral researchers was an indicator of exceptional achievement under research supervision and management. So I was glad I had taken them, not realizing that how important the university considered that. And I suppose finally, in this process, having colleagues who are happy to help you, and especially those that had recently been through the process. So I was lucky to have 2, one very close colleague and another colleague who had been promoted under this system maybe a year before me, who gave me lots of advice and help. And I had another colleague who was happy to read my drafts of my application, not only to give me some feedback, but because they'd worked with me to say, you've forgotten to put that in. Do you remember you did that? And that was also very useful. So really, that's all I wanted to say. To thank you for listening, and to hopefully, I think after the next presenter, to answer any questions. I don't remember a lot. The last 6 months has been very busy in my new role as Associate Dean for Teaching and Learning. So I have found that a lot of stuff that happened before that has been forgotten, but I'll do my best, as I say. So thank you. So I'll stop sharing my screen, go to mute.
Great, thanks very much for that, Aine. And I think we'll move directly then to Eamonn. Eamonn, if you're okay with that, and then we'll come back to both of you at the end.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot, Aine, for that presentation. And like yourself, I'm delighted to help and participate in this workshop today. What you'll see is, Aine, you're not the only potential lifer in UCD. I started my career in UCD, graduated from the bachelor's degree of physiotherapy in 2003. And the sad thing is I could be potentially in UCD for just under another 30 years. So maybe that's, well, it's a nice place to work anyway. But just to chart my individual journey, I went straight from my bachelor's into a PhD. I completed that in 2006. I did work clinically full-time for a year and then got an appointment as college lecturer in 2007, and then was promoted to senior lecturer in 2014. That was quite a different process to the process that's in place at the moment. I actually applied in winter 2012, and it was a competitive process at school level, college level, and then across the university. And then successful applicants, their tenure as senior lecturer started in January 2014. Then I was promoted to professor in July 2018. So I submitted my application in February 2018 and then got the nice letter from the president in July 2018. So it was kind of a quick enough process for me. So maybe I was lucky enough. But in order to, where did it really start for me, considering an application for promotion to professor? Well, I have a really good relationship with my former head of school. Most mornings we would go to the Conway Institute and have a coffee together. And one of the things about the former head of school was he was quite focused from a research metrics perspective in particular. And just reflecting upon a number of conversations that I had with him about my own research metrics and then what I had achieved from a teaching and learning perspective since sort of winter 2012 stimulated in my mind, you know, a little bit of a reflection process and then thoughts about applying for promotion. So how did I then engage with the process? Well, there are two documents that I actually spent a lot of time reading, and I would go so far as say that I studied them in quite a lot of detail and quite a lot of depth. And they were the development framework for faculty. And I think when you're starting off on the process, it's really, really important that you understand the different domains. So looking at the research, scholarship, innovation, teaching and learning, and leadership and contribution, and then really assimilating what is the level that you're applying for and what is required for achievement of outstanding achievement in the various domains. The other thing that I was maybe a little bit crafty with as well was really engaging with UCD's strategy from 2015 to 2020 and really familiarizing myself with that document and trying to link any of my achievements at an outstanding level to contribution to the university that appeared in that UCD strategy from 2015 to 2020. And of course, we know that the new strategy is available 2020 to 2024. So I would encourage anybody who is thinking about applying to really familiarize themselves with that document and try to provide objective quantifications of your outstanding achievement and potentially link them back to UCD's strategy to show or articulate how you are making an outstanding contribution to the university. So what I want to do now is just go through a number of different domains and give you some examples of how I actually articulated some of the text around what I was writing. So if we look at this research area first, looking at publication and profile. So in order to be promoted to or achieve at a professor level, you need to have an outstanding and sustained record of publication in leading international journals, have to show significant impact and indicate that you're a leader in a particular area or areas of research. So one of the first things that I did when I was engaging with the process was to use the development framework, read through it very, very critically, study it, and then jot down or highlight where I felt I was in the framework, and then start to accumulate the quantitative and qualitative evidence to back up what I was going to write. So an example of what I wrote for that, which I felt showed outstanding or perhaps even exceptional track record in a publication profile was, since submitting my application for promotion to senior lecturer, which is now associate professor, which was in winter 2012, I've quadrupled my number of peer-reviewed article publications. And this is an exceptional level of productivity. I've now published 102 peer-reviewed articles, with a further 2 articles accepted and in press, both of which are in journals ranked within the top quartile of the respective journal citation reports categories. So I think you can potentially use tools such as the journal citation reports to accumulate evidence to support your application. And what I've just done now is just made a small video of people to how to access that if you're not familiar. So you go to library, databases, go to J, and journal citation reports, Web of Science. And that brings you to this construct here. You can browse by journals, and then you can select your specific categories. And the category that was specific to me was the sport sciences category, which is a distinct category of the journal citation reports. And what that gives you is the list of journals in a specific area, and it gives you the rankings of those journals. So you can see here, the British Journal of Sports Medicine is the top ranked journal in the sports sciences section of the journal citation reports. And from my understanding, what the Faculty Promotions Committee are really interested in for professor and full professor level is the number of publications that you have, so overall volume, but also the quality of those publications. And really, I think they're focused on what we would classify as Q1 journals. So journals within the top quartile of the specific section that you are publishing in, and also the proportion of those publications where you're either first author or senior author. So I think what I was able to do then was to look at my publications. So look at those 102 publications. I was able to break it down and say X number of publications were published in journals within the top quartile of the sports sciences section of the journal citation reports. And I was also able to list the proportion or the number of articles that I had published as senior author or lead author or senior author in those Q1 journals. So that was perhaps a tip when you're thinking about engaging in this process as well. I think there are also other fantastic tools available to us. And I would encourage people to perhaps have a look at SciVal. And SciVal is available through the databases section in the library. So you follow a similar process. Once you're logged in to Connect, go to library, go to databases, go to S. SciVal appears under S. And what you can do then is start to look at how you rank within your own school. And that's something that I was able to place a lot of emphasis on, and I was able to benchmark my level of research productivity to other individuals in my school at the same rank as me or at professor or full professor level. And what I was able to establish there was that I was publishing at an equivalent or higher level than a lot of professors and indeed full professors in my school. So again, it's just thinking about being a little bit crafty from that perspective, and it can give you an indication as to your overall level of productivity from a research perspective. Would also encourage you to think about your profile on Scopus and think about your Google Scholar profile as well. And I'll just give you an indication of some of the text that I wrote around my Scopus profile and my Google Scholar profile. So I inserted these two short sentences. So my Scopus profile, at that point I had 1900 citations, my H index was 21, my 10 index was 45, and 7 of my articles had been cited more than 100 times, and 13 of my peer-reviewed articles had been cited more than 50 times. So it's a way of framing your achievements from a publication perspective. And I did something very similar from Google Scholar. So Google Scholar in February 2018, I had 3,500 citations. My H index was 27, I-10 index of 60. And then again, framing my peer-reviewed publications in terms of how many had been cited, 200 times or more, 150 times more, 100 times or more, or 50 times and more. So again, it's thinking about putting your best foot forward and articulating those research metrics so that they give an indication of outstanding achievement. So if we then move to the leadership and contribution. So one of the examples that I'm going to give is leadership or major role in the initiation and completion of major course reviews. And one of the projects that I happened to be involved with, and quite luckily so, was I was given the opportunity to be the curriculum review and enhancement champion within my school for the curriculum review and enhancement process. So this is the narrative that I constructed around this. And what I did is, you can see that I've linked it back to the UCD strategy to clearly articulate how it is valued within the university. So the UCD curriculum review and enhancement process was devised in consultation with deans and graduate school directors. It was initiated to contribute to UCD's strategic drive for excellence in education, and it aligns to Strategic Initiative 2, defining educational excellence of the UCD strategy. And then my supporting evidence was the CREP was steered locally within each school in the university by project champions, whose role it was to liaise and work closely with program directors or coordinators and individual module coordinators. And I was appointed project champion. The dates were from August 2015 to December 2016 within my school after a competitive process. And I think that was important to put in, that I actually had to submit an expression of interest along with my CV, and then that was adjudicated by a panel of senior academics within our school. And then as project champion, I assumed a major leadership role within my school in contributing to the completion of a university-wide review of undergraduate and postgraduate programs and modules. And the work completed by the project champions across UCD and their contribution to the CREP has been integral to UCD's strategy for the enhancement of education. So again, it's utilizing something that I had done, contributing at an outstanding level, and linking it back to UCD's strategy. So there can be no ambiguities in terms of what you have done and how it has influenced something new or some initiative within the university. Then my example from leadership and administration. So I felt that I had outstanding contribution to the university through a significant, sustained and successful leadership role. So one of the current roles that I have at a university level is academic mentor to the Ad Astra elite sports scholars. So I created some narrative around that because it's quite a complex, quite an involved process whereby on a yearly basis, I'm responsible for mentoring around 60 athletes who compete at national and international level. And if we think about UCD's strategy, again, the Ad Astra Academy features, or did feature as part of that 2015 to 2020 strategy. So what I developed was, in terms of my narrative, so at that point, I'm the sole academic mentor for the UCD Ad Astra Elite Sports Scholars. And that position was since 2010. And this university level position requires substantial and sustained commitment to student support and development, is a major and complex role that is integral to the success of the Ad Astra Elite Sports Academy, which currently has over 60 athletes in a variety of sports up to and including Olympic level. And 9 of Ireland's 77 athletes who competed at the 2016 Summer Olympic Games were members of the UCD Ad Astra Elite Sports Academy. I then also constructed some narrative around how this academic mentoring aligns with 2 of the 10 objectives outlined in the UCD strategy from 2015 to 2020. And there was some narrative constructed around those 2 specific objectives. So that kind of gives you an example of some of the narrative that I constructed around various domains, and I would have done similar to all the other domains. But I think a couple of concluding remarks that I would have is really have a strong declarative opening statement whereby you really hammer home that, in your estimation, supported by quantitative or qualitative information, you benchmark to outstanding contribution. And I think that needs to be backed up by a strong declarative closing statement as well. And what I would suggest is the use of the active voice. So I have done this, or these are my metrics of achievement. So really you're starting with a very strong opening and you're concluding with a strong opening again, because when we're thinking about people who are reviewing these documents, it's first impression and then your last impression as well. And everything in between should be the quantitative or qualitative information to back up your opening or concluding statement. One of the things that I would encourage people to do is to get feedback from trusted senior colleagues. So I was able to engage with a number of colleagues from actually outside my school who were in senior positions. So people who were full professors who were able to kind of objectively look at my application and provide some feedback to me in where I could strengthen particular areas or areas that were weak that needed a little bit of bolstering. Similar to what Aine has articulated, it is a very involved process, and I would suggest that you do not rush the application. Think about it very, very carefully, chip away at it piece by piece and start to accumulate your evidence. And then also think about choosing your reviewers carefully. So in my instance, what I had to do was nominate 3 potential external reviewers, and then the head of school had to nominate 5. So my understanding was that 2 of his 5 nominees would be asked to contribute and 1 of my 3. So obviously you can't nominate people whom you've collaborated with in the past, but I think you can be a little bit clever. And what I would suggest is try utilize people who know who you are, or think about, you know, people in other institutions who you've collaborated closely with. And is there a person in their institution or in the same department as them who you haven't collaborated with, but would be able to look upon your application favorably? So the other thing that I was told was to try and look at institutions that are of a similar ranking to UCD in the global metrics. So whether that's the QS World University Rankings or the Shanghai Academic Rankings for World Universities, and start to look at what institutions that are higher ranked than UCD or similar ranking to UCD have schools or departments that are similar to the one that you're currently working in. And I use that to then potentially identify reviewers along with some of the contacts that I have built up over the last number of years from a research perspective. So that's where I would like to finish. And I'm very happy to engage with people if they want to open up individual conversations and chat to me about that. I think it's a collegial thing to do. And over the last number of months, well, probably 6 to 8 months, I've worked with a number of colleagues in my own school who have been successful through different levels of promotions rounds. So if anybody wants to contact me in person, my email is there, and I'd be happy to have a chat on Zoom or tic-tac back and forth via email. So that's me. Hope that was somewhat useful, and look forward to engaging in a bit of conversation now.
Great. Thanks a million, Eamonn, and also Aine. I think, it was a real personal insight into your journeys, which was exactly what we need. And I hope all of you who've been tuned in there found it useful. There's just, maybe first of all, just go to a couple of questions that are there, and then maybe we'll open it up to anybody else who may have a question but hasn't typed it up. So one is from Claire there. Can you nominate program external examiners with whom you have not written research papers?
Go ahead, Aine.
I don't remember. You in?
I would say that there could be a potential conflict of interest there. I would imagine, Claire, it's worth trying, and then it's worth getting some direction from head of school and college principal. But I would expect that the recommendation would be no.
Yeah.
Actually, Frank, just to cut across there, one thing I forgot to say, and I don't know whether Eamon did the same. I attended one of the workshops that's run by, I don't know who runs it, HR or the registrar. There was a promotions workshop, and that was very useful because you have the people there who sort of make the decisions, and those kind of questions you could raise at such a workshop. You're advised to attend one of them before applying. One of those, I should say.
Yeah, I did attend one of them, and it was somewhat useful,
Yeah, great. Are there any other questions people have that may not be in the text box but may just occur to you? All silent. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was just fantastic, and I won't go over all the tests, but there's lots of things. I was just writing them down here that you've both touched on some similar things, but also different aspects that I think are really useful, no matter what stage you are in the promotion process here. So if there's nothing else, I think we can probably wrap it up. Was there anything else, Beth, you wanted to add there? Or?
No, nothing to add there. Just to note that somebody has put in a response there to Claire's question about the external assessors. Just a note there in the chat. Okay,
from Jonathan. Okay, where the external assessor has a formal paid or yeah. Okay, so you see it there, Claire. So. Beth, this is recorded, so will it be circulated in an email, the link to the recording? Is that the way it works, or?
Exactly. So I'm going to, I'll send it out by email to everybody who was registered to this session. So everybody here should get it for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So look, I mean, I think everybody who's been here today would like to express their appreciation to both Aine and Eamonn. I think it was excellent, really spot on what we needed. You know, thanks for your openness as well to accept questions after this if people have them, you know. And so also on behalf of the committee, I think we're genuinely delighted with this.
Great. Okay, thanks a lot for the opportunity.
Good stuff. So look, just to wish everyone a good weekend, and we'll all be together face to face, hopefully before too long. All right. Okay. Have a good weekend. All right. Bye-bye. Bye.